Titusville has always been part of your life, hasn't it?
It has been.
Talk to me about the Titusville of your youth. What do you remember about it?
My youth, well, may I go back when we moved to Titusville? First of all, we lived in Avondale on 2nd Avenue South, 3827, 2nd Avenue South. We stayed there until approximately 1949, and that's when we moved from Avondale to Titusville, to First Street, between 4th and 5th Avenue in Titusville, on the western side of Washington School. And my parents and their mothers also moved there, and a niece. So my parents, John Cantelow, my mother, Dosiana Cantelow, my grandmother, Bama Cantelow, my cousin, Eddie Mae Cantelow, my sister, Vivian Cantelow, moved in a shotgun house next on First Street in approximately 1945.
Was Titusville from a child's perspective, how old were you again when you made that move?
I was in the 5th grade.
5th grade.
5th grade.
Old enough to be conscious of your world.
Right.
So what was the world of John Cantelow at that point?
Well, I made an adjustment because in Avondale, the community was a one street that black lived on in Avondale. It wasn't paved, it was dirt street. So when we moved to Titusville, First Street at that time was a paved street. So that was something new for me. And there were black kids in the neighborhood that I saw when we first moved there. So we became friends in growing up. I didn't go to Washington School because my father was interested in me learning to play an instrument. So back to Avondale, when we lived in Avondale, he sold his car, a 1939 Oldsmobile, so that he would be able to purchase me a clarinet, a silver clarinet from Austin Music Store on 4th Avenue North, downtown. And while I lived there in Avondale, my first musician was Dr. Thomas Lyles. He was the band director for Florida A&M at Alabama State. He taught me, he was my first music teacher when I lived in Avondale. So when we moved to Titusville, Washington School did not have a band. So the principal at Lincoln School, which had the only black band in the city of Birmingham during my period of time, R.C. Johnson was the principal there at Lincoln School. He and my mother was one of his students in high school, so they reflected back by knowing each other from the past. We had no special school assignments to my knowledge at that time, so I was able to go from Titusville to Lincoln School each day so I could have band, be taught. The band director, Mr. Handy, at Lincoln School. So I was able to get into that program at Lincoln School. I walked from Titusville to Lincoln School every day and walked back home so I could have band lessons.
That was no short distance.
No, it was long distance. But they had no way of getting. My dad didn't have a car. No one I knew who was going in that direction could drop me off school. So rain or snow, I walked.
People often talk about, particularly of an older generation, about having to walk miles to school and having to walk uphill both ways, and other such stories. Perhaps theirs was embellishment. Yours was not.
No. That was something it didn't bother me at all because walking the streets, and it was a shortcut that I would take to get to Lincoln School, and I made it on time every day and back home safely.
What was the shortcut?
Going through some wide open fields or going across the train tracks going through England, the back of England's ironwork, so I could get to 9th Street and 8th Avenue North. Going up the railroad track. That was a track that ran right on beside of Lincoln School during my period of time.
Did your father again? Your father sold his car for you to have that instrument.
Yes.
Did your father ever tell you, or did you ever speculate, what was it about you and playing an instrument that motivated him to do this?
I really can't answer that question, but he played around with the trombone, I understand, when he was a teenager. And during that period of time, if you can remember, most people can't, Tommy Dorsey was a trombone player. And Benny Goodman was a clarinetist at that time. And my daddy used to love to dance a little bit. They used to call him Daddy Longlegs. And he would go to little events. And he was a music lover. And he wanted to see if I would be able to become a musician. And I think that was in his mind at that time.
I've heard people say that, and I'm not one of those, who had the benefit of formal training in a musical instrument, but that individuals who learn a musical instrument perhaps have a leg up in education. As one who is in education, do you think there's any credibility to that theory?
There's some correlation to that. And because of that, when I went to Parker High School, played in the band there under Mr. Hudson. He was the band director at Hudson at Parker High School. And when I left Parker High School, I went to Miles College. Ike Williams was on staff at Miles College. He was over the band. In addition to what he did at Miles, he had a professional dance band. He invited me, and by the way, he was my second music teacher when I moved from Avondale to Titusville. He taught me the clarinet in the basement of his parents. And he was my second music teacher for the clarinet. He had some previous knowledge of me when I went to Miles College, so I could read music, and he put me in his dance band. And I played professionally with him. We played for dances, for fraternity dances, clubs, while I was at Miles. And by the way, that helped me to pay my tuition at Miles College. I was on a work scholarship at Miles College. Dr. Bell put me on a work scholarship. My tuition, I had some help with my tuition. By the way, my daddy was, as I haven't mentioned, he was my idol. If not that number 2 question you have up there. He was my idol. He didn't finish grade school, but he could fix many things. He could carpenter. He was a carpenter, electrician, automobile mechanic. He could fix on radios. Back in those days, we had tubes. We didn't have the computer board like we have now. We had tubes looked like light bulbs in radios back in those days. He could fix those things. Plumbing. So anything he did back in those days, in my growing up with my daddy, he always would call me Bob. He would say, Bob, come here. I want you to watch me do this. Some of those skills pass from him to me, and I can do most of those things now without any training.
Your dad was your hero.
He was my hero.
And particularly when it came to your abilities, fixing things in life, was your role model.
Yes.
But you did not follow that path. Why?
Well, when I went to Miles, when I graduated, I had a major in history. And the reason that I got my first job, it was because of music. Montevallo High School, Prentice High School rather, in Montevallo hired me when I graduated from college to be the band director and to teach science. So the music helped me get my first job, and it helped me a whole lot after I left. It brought me to Birmingham to be a teacher at Hill School, a band teacher and a science teacher. So back when he sold that 1939 Oldsmobile, it's still paying off when I even got my first job in education.
So your father planted a seed.
Yes, he did.
Actually, he planted multiple seeds, if I can extrapolate a little.
Mm-hmm.
He planted the seed of knowledge, the ability to construct, to repair. I presume, from what you said earlier, I think I heard you say this, that what you do, you try to do it well. And I presume you got that from your father also.
Everything. And that's I still believe in that doing. If you do a job, do it well. Do it or not at all.
And he planted a seed in the selling of that vehicle to give you your ability, the tool through which you would perform music, which influenced the very path that you followed. Have you given much thought to
all of the time? I can't miss it, because had it been for my major at Miles, social studies teachers positions were hard to find. But band got me my first teaching job in Model Valley at Prentice High School. And then that's how I got to Hill School, with the band attached to me, my music ability attached to me, with W.W. Whetstone. He was the principal then.
You mentioned before, when you lived in Avondale, that blacks lived on one street, a dirt street.
That's correct. And it abutted the white neighborhood. Across the street, beginning of the white neighborhood, the west side was a black street, unpaved, where we lived. On the other side, the east side of 39th Street, whites lived, all the way back to that, where Avondale Park is now located.
Was there any sense that, pardon the play on words, that you lived on the wrong side of the street?
We did, and I can tell you why. One night, a black family moved across the street in front of my daddy's house in Avondale. That was once only whites lived in. A black family moved into the house right in front of us on the other corner. 4 o'clock one morning, my daddy's house was set afire. They missed the wrong house.
They intended to get them, but
they got my daddy's house. So 4 o'clock in the morning, the house was on fire. And what happened, the neighbors on that one black street there, they took us in. We stayed there until the renter repaired the house. It was too small for us to live in, so we had to move. We moved from Avondale to Titusville during that time. And the neighbors, I slept on the beds in my neighbor's house until their house. My dad and mama, other neighbors took them in.
We talked before about you seeing black children at play in Titusville and becoming friends with them. If I'm not extrapolating too far, it seems as though you've gone from a very confined residential area in terms of where black people could live to a broad area.
That's correct. Much broader, because there were no black kids other than my street, and over 1 block away, north of where we lived, 1 block away, the train track. It was called Seaboard Train, Southern Train, and a few blacks lived on the back street. It wasn't a street; it was on the railroad track.
So, am I taking too big a stretch to believe that Titusville maybe felt like a land of opportunity?
It was ideal, and it is now, and I still live in Titusville. It was ideal. People You could walk the street, people would talk with you, you got to know each other. I had a bicycle. I rode all over Titusville, and we'll talk about that later. Everywhere, on every street, I knew people personally. They knew my family. And that was a plus for Titusville. And it's still that way. Back sometime, I know we have some other discussion, but let me hold that until we talk about the overall Titusville, because it was a very nice place to live and to grow up. And we had a lot of good people to live in Titusville, professional, all type work, plant workers, a mixed community in Titusville, and it's still that way.
And again, this project serves two purposes. Part of it, Bart, is what you were talking with Paul about. Titusville was a destination. It was a place where black folks wanted to come because black folks could aspire to anything there.
Right, and that was a part of the cities, but Titusville I can talk about more. In reading something, it might be, I may quote this wrong, but back, in the late 1800s, you had a lot of streets at the beginning of Titusville inception that you had. They were Greek. There were Greek names of those streets: Delta, Kappa, Omega, and it's my understanding that the Jews owned that land at that time. And I believe they were the first to sell blacks in the city of Birmingham property to build homes and businesses in that part of where those streets are still named, have Greek names. And so owning property, and that's a big plus for Titusville right now. We have, back in the days when they first started building in Titusville, black people had big houses up on the south end of Titusville, south side of Titusville. Like we call it the south and the north side. If you go up on First Avenue, it was a big house up there, on First Avenue and First Street. They looked like a house that you saw over the mountain. And we had some architects, I understand. My mother-in-law and father-in-law, they owned that house. And there were a lot on First Avenue South. They owned those houses. They built them. They didn't rent them. And some of those houses are still standing. And we're talking more about Honeysuckle Hill and Lincoln Park and Havens, or the new section where they built houses, home for people to buy them and own them. And that was a plus for Titusville. And we had a lot of people who owned houses. And for example, when I first married and got my first job and moved back to Birmingham from Montevallo, it was in my intent to I wanted my own house. I rented an apartment, a brand new apartment on 5th Avenue Southwest when we first married in December. Stayed down until August, 8 months. But I was determined, and so was my wife, to get a house. So we moved into this house over on 10th Avenue Southwest. And I'm still there. We renovated, had more rooms. We didn't move away from Titusville. Got good neighbors. Community is still vibrant. So we're still there. I'm still there. And by the way, she passed 4 years and 4 months ago. And I'll talk about her family, and if you ask me a question later on about it.
Sure. I'm going to shift off of Titusville, but ever so slightly.
Sure.
Birmingham, for people who look like us, at that time, when you were living in Avondale and then subsequently moving to Titusville, talk about that experience.
Well, in Avondale, I attended East Avondale School. Bessie Estelle was the principal there. She was my first principal. And the reason they called it East Avondale School, that was an Avondale school, which was located right by the Avondale Park up on the hill there. all of this is during the segregated years, segregation. So I walked through the white neighborhoods from my home to get to East Avondale School, up 3rd Avenue. And East Avondale School was located back behind Continental Gin. That was another big building. It was back behind that building there, down by the railroad tracks. Wooden building. But the Avondale School was brick all the way. This was a wooden building. And by the way, Mr. Goodson was a teacher there. He was later on became principal of Carver High School. He was a teacher at Avondale School back in that day. And so walking through the neighborhood, I had no problem. Sometimes I would go up the railroad track, Seabolt, you could get to it the back way, or you could go up 3rd Avenue and get to it at East Avondale School.
It seems clear that in Avondale, the separation between blacks and whites was clear and abrupt. This is where you should be. This is where you better not be.
Correct.
But Titusville, this was like the promised land.
It was for my family and for me. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Because it feels as though Titusville was designed for blacks.
Well,
and it's fairly affluent blacks.
Well, I can talk about that I have Titusville. I have a list here of principals that I was connected with in Titusville. It was an opportunity, Titusville, we had a lot of professionals to live in Titusville. Doctors, judges, lawyers, principals, support people for the school system, Jefferson, whether they were employees of Jefferson County or any other school system in the county, Bessemer, so forth. I have a list of principals who lived in Titusville. I'm going to call them out to you. Newman Terrell, he lived on Green Springs Avenue. Betty McGee. Mr. Warren, he lived on Goldwire. He was a principal at the pipe shop in Bessemer. William Snow, Robert Hill, N.B. Cephas, Mrs. Margaret B. Little, Mr. Goodson, he was the principal of Carver. He lived in Titusville. Freddie Shepard, Imogene Shepard, Lucinda Roby, she was a principal. She was a principal in there. Mr. Parnell Jones lived on Center Street. Edgar Hopper, he was principal in Bessemer. James Farris, he lived on Honeysuckle Hill. Mr. Howard, he lived on Green Springs Avenue. Mr. Tarleton Russell, he was a principal in Bessemer School System. John Traylor was principal of Lincoln School. Osha White was the husband of Gregory Dell White. Her son was a doctor at the Cleveland Clinic, Eugene White, and her son Roger White was over a portion of redevelopment in Titusville. He passed away. Barbara Wilder, Willie Wilder. So these were just in education. There were doctors out there and other people. We had one of our mayors, William Bell, lived in Titusville. We had George Pearson. He lived in Titusville, grew up in Titusville, where Lawman Village used to be, is now built. He was a judge and a lawyer and a state representative. So there were a lot of professionals in Titusville. And again, they were homeowners.
I take it that it was not coincidence that they wound up in Titusville.
I can't answer that, but they were there. And I imagine the living conditions of owning a home, building a home was available. Because as you remember, as you must know, Lincoln Park was the first development of home ownership in Titusville. It was one street, but it was about 3 or 4 blocks long, Lincoln Park. We had a lot of people who were home keepers. And the thing about it, they are still being upkept, and that's the main thing. If we need to do to our properties, if we own them, keep them in shape, grass, painting, and material, repair them, and they will last for long. That's why Titusville is still where it is right now, because the homeowners made repairs to some of those homes, and we have some places that I'm like in where else in the city, but these are homeowners.
And they took pride in those homes.
Yes, they did.
And that seems to be a standard that is maintained even today.
Even today, in certain parts, even today, but you have new people to move in. They have a different way of thinking about properties.
Perhaps they don't have, and perhaps they haven't had the education of what came before.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because some of these people are educated, but it's another part of who you are. If you want your surroundings to be kept well, and I still do that. My little place right now, in fact, yesterday, during this past winter, the frost, I took out some of my boxwoods. I planted 20 of them yesterday afternoon. Replaced them. That's part of keeping your property up.
We talked before about that mindset of Titusville, that this was this wonderful place for black folks. I'll ask you a question, and I don't know if this conversation ever took place in your home, but what do you imagine your parents, or maybe you actually posed a question, or made the point, of wanting to be president of the United States back when you lived in Avondale, or perhaps when you initially moved to Titusville? What might your parents have said to you?
Well, back then, politics was not in my family discussions, because we in presidents back in those days, I don't think I can remember a conversation about government period, other than ride the bus. You go to the back of the bus. You sit, when you catch the bus over there on 4th Avenue, you go to the back of the bus when you catch the bus, and be careful. And when you go downtown, you use that elevator where it say color. That was, we didn't discuss politics in my house when I grew up like we do now.
And not necessarily, and not just limited to political positions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware of Caucasians long being able to tell their children that you could someday be president of the United States, that you can aspire to that, because everything is within your grasp. I suspect black folks or black parents would have been at best hesitant to make that declaration to their children.
Remember, this was a staunch segregation everywhere during the country. So even the governorship of we had Bull Connor down there, in discussion was he was the most named person at City Hall during my period. Bull Connor. And he lived out in Crenshaw. And Chief Swindle, the father, let me mention this too. My son, I'm jumping ahead, he became associate pastor at 6th Avenue, and he got a full-time job with Dr. Porter. My experience, I wanted him to have, and my wife, we wanted him to have a home. So what we did, we helped him to buy a house in Crestwood. And guess what? One of his next door neighbors was Chief Swindle, who put the fire hoses on us back in the days. And behind him, Bull Connor, president. Bull Connor was not alive, but Chief Wonder was. We had many. He was a changed man from the fire hose. He lived right next door.
You say he was a changed man. Did you at all struggle with the reality of who he used to be?
No, because you have to. We all make changes, some kind of way, and the conversation that I had with him, sitting in his backyard, because he invited us over there. He and his wife, and I didn't talk with him back during the time the hose pipes were used, but we just had a decent conversation. He brought up that issue. He said I was wrong, blah blah blah, to me in his backyard. Neighbors.
I'm a preacher's kid, as you've already noted,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm recalling a recent Bible study, Sunday school lesson, about Saul being blinded on the way to Damascus, and how a prophet was instructed by God to go find him, and the prophet, aware of this person's reputation, effectively said, God, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, right.
I can see you almost having the same experience.
I did because, I only saw pictures of it, and back in that time, we had television, the news, and but to sit there and listening to him, it was just like he was a regular old man.
A regular old man who in his younger days had been something less than nice.
Well, he took directions from his boss, because City Hall was something else back in those days when we had all the protests, the bombings, and all that, and that was the thing of that day and that time.
I have to admit that, and I think I might be able to, but there are those who would say, no, I could. The expression is forgive and forget. I know some number of people would have difficulty with either of those.
Yeah. Well, see, as I indicated, my daddy, you haven't asked this question, but my daddy was my mentor. And he was a person people. And I got some of those traits because I can meet anybody. I don't care if you're black, white, Chinese, whatever, and where you live, that doesn't make any difference with me. People are people. And my daddy was pretty good at that. He could meet with anybody. And back to this, if you wrong somebody, if you apologize in a way that you know that the person is sincere, you accept it and try to make things better. And that's what we all are striving to do, I guess.
I still say amazing. I still say amazing. You talked before about businesses. Those of us who grew up in Titusville later than yourself might recognize some signs. Talk about some of those locales.
Let me. I wrote some of this down, and I still may miss some, but I going back in my mind. First of all, the Joy Theater was built in Titusville on 6th Avenue and First Street, off of First Street. And when that theater opened, it was almost like the one that was on 8th Avenue in my mind. 8th Avenue Theater had one over in Smithfield, down from Park High School. And to have one in Titusville where we could go see a movie and not watch the black and white TV at home, it was an outlet for people in the community. But when the theater was built, it was still not first class. They didn't have air conditioning in it. It had wooden seats in it, and the fans in front of on the side of the screen kept up more noise on the screen. I mean, the movie you were watching. So it wasn't the kind of, I'm saying, buildings construction like a theater should have been, but it was almost another substitute. But it worked for a while, and I remember the people who worked there, ticket sellers. They were Booby Gardner. Two sisters worked. One worked the ticket booth, and one worked the concession stand. And they lived in Titusville, down on behind Lincoln Park. They used to be employees of that theater. The Rex drugstore, which people would not know existed in Titusville, it was owned by the parents of Robert Jones over at teacher at Parker High School. He was in Acton. His name was Robert Jones. I worked at Rex when I was in Titusville during the summer. I was the delivery. I used my bicycle on Sunday afternoons to carry ice cream, who called the drugstore, to be delivered to their homes. Rex drugstore, and the owners lived on South Side, on 17th Street, the Joneses. It was a very nice, clean drugstore. Right next door to it had a bakery, the Smith Bakery, right next to Rex drugstore on 1st Avenue and 6th Avenue. The first bakery that he owned was down by the city jail, now being used by one of the bonding companies. He moved to next to the rest and had his son working in there, had a nice bakery there. Next to that was the paper house, Birmingham newspaper house. During that period of time, they dropped the papers off and had carriers to come and pick them up, deliver them to the homes in the area. Then later on, Superior Cleaners was built there, a black owner, and he lived in West End out by Preston Hospital. He owned the Superior Cleaners. Then and next to that, there was across the street, we had right on 1st Street and 6th Avenue, there right on the corner at the bus stop, there was an ice house. You know why? Blacks and a lot of blacks didn't have refrigerators. They had ice boxes. You go up there and get a 50-pound of ice. By the time you walked in the summer to your house, it may have been 35 pounds because it was so hot it melted. But it was on an ice string. That's how you kept your food cool in the refrigerator. And behind the ice house, that was the Golden Dawn Cafe, was owned by blacks. And behind it, in that building, they had a beauty parlor for ladies to rent booths. My mother was one of those beauticians back there during that period of time. She rented a booth in that particular building. Then on the other corner, you had the social cleaners. During that time, Mr. Pippins, I think he had several branches throughout the city. And that was social cleaners on the other corner over there. And he was a member of that church that I'm looking now. See, I believe 16th Street. He was one of the first people that I always see on that film when it was bombed. He would be Mr. Pippin would be out there, because that was a shock to everybody. Happened in December 1963, I believe. But then we had a broom factory in Titusville. You know where it was located? It was on 1st Street and 6th Avenue. It was a dirt street where the Immaculata High School is now stand. It was across the street from where Immaculata apartments there now. There was a broom factory there. It wasn't for the blind like we have out on 3rd Avenue. People just worked in there as anyone. It was a broom factory. They made brooms. Then on the other corner, across on 6th Avenue, 1st Street, Mr. Tanksley had a Shell service station there. It was built through the Shell company, and he was a black owner of a Shell service station. He kept it very clean. He lived on Omega Street, and he had a large family, a lot of people, but he had a business there on that. Then if you go back down to going west on 6th Avenue, you had a lot of stores out there. Bowman store. Bowman, I live right next to him. The owner, not the Joe Jr., but the senior Bowman. He had a store right there on the alley. He ran it himself. I live right next door to him. And on the other side, the Furloughs lived, and then on the corner it had a cafe. It was owned by Mr. Smith. They used to call it Smutty Bear. Had a big rock cola. That's what you could hear most times. If you put a dime in it, you could get your sounded like these kids now with these stereos in these cars. It would sound like it was throughout the neighborhood with that rock cola down there. Going further south on Avenue C, which is 3rd Avenue, you had Mr. Rowe's Cafe. He had no legs. It was built over the ditch. And then next to him, you had Mr. He sold coal back in those days. And I'm gonna talk about the coal. To my period of time, we didn't have any gas in Titusville. They claimed that they couldn't run a pipe under the train tracks coming from around the bend to come out of the track to give gas, natural gas to the residents of Titusville. It took many years for them to get gas in there. We had to use coal and wood to heat our homes. And when we moved to Titusville, we had heaters, and in the kitchen, my dad had a plan. He had the kitchen stove. It had a jacket in it that hot water would come in it. So when you made a fire in the kitchen stove, it heated the water that came from the line of the tank behind, and that was the only means we had hot water until they put gas into Titusville. And by the way, when they did, I sat up 2 nights looking at that blue flame in the kitchen because in Titusville we had no other methods unless you had electricity, of wood and coal. And on top of that, we had other stores. We had the Armstrong store over on the south side of Titusville, the Kennedy store, grocery store on the south side of Titusville. And back to the north side, you had the Big Williams on the corner of 6th Avenue, across from the library now is, Big Williams. And he had a large family. He lived in that house right there. And also down on the next corner, 5th Avenue, he had the dentist store. He had a store and a little screen-in cafe behind it. He made the best hot dogs that you could eat, other than Palmer's over in Smithfield. You remember Palmer's?
The name is familiar.
It was next on 8th Avenue North, next to the theater, or maybe a block. About how Palmer's. They sold hot dogs. But back to dentist, he had a screen back on his store. He sold hot dogs there. And on the next corner on 4th Avenue, we had Frank's store. He was an Italian. So, and then further back on 1st Street, we had Lucky Seven store. And by the way, when Bowman came back, he graduated from Alabama A&M, he and his wife, Ella. They built the store on 4th Avenue, a new store. It was one of the best looking stores, a black owned at that time. When you walked in the door, they had little, like you see now, it was a self-service store where you could go and pick up stuff all out through the aisles and a meat. And by the way, I worked there in the evenings and in the mornings and on Saturday, on weekends. He taught me to butcher. I was his butcher back there. Cut up the cows that we got from Homel Meat Factory on 2nd Avenue. We bring those out. He showed me how to cut up steaks and ham and to fix the meat. We didn't have packaged meat back in those days. So, and back on the other corner, we had Lucky Seven grocery store. It was an Italian store. John Fasigilo. I was his full-time worker up there because the two of us, by my experience with being a butcher, that helped me to get employment with him. I was his butcher at Lucky Seven.
Is there anything that Titusville didn't have?
Yes. Let me go back to it. Back in my day, Memorial Park was just a plain field. Nothing. We used to go up in the afternoon and nothing to do. So behind where I lived on First Street, there was a preacher by the name of Reverend Cowan. He was a pastor of a church, and I can't call the church up there on Capper Avenue near Memorial Park now. One day he wanted the kids in the neighborhood to have something to do at Memorial Park. He took some lumber up to Memorial Park, built a single swing for the kids in the afternoon when we came up there, just to swing at a single swing. We were lined up to to use his wooden swing he made. In addition to that point about the swing, the community got concerned about it, and you couldn't get in City Hall unless you went in the back door to request anything for the park. So a group finally got the Park and Recreation Department to listen to them. What did they do? Avondale Park was getting new swings. They took those swings,
The old ones.
the old ones, brought them to Titusville for us to swing in. By the means of Reverend Cowers, with that wooden swing he started. We had a tennis court there at Jim Finley, one of the tall, he could play some tennis back in my day. He used that tennis court. It's cut out right now, but there was no background to catch your balls. So they made another tennis court up on the other end by England Ironworks. Then they put the swimming pool there. And the Center for Activity in the building. Back in my day, Titusville always had swimming pools. You know why? We had 3. One was a tank called a tank over by the jail was a ditch. One was at Mungo's over down by where Lovman's Village is now, back towards the railroad there. It was called Mungo's. Back, we had another one over by the slag pit by England Ironworks. We had 3 pools, free. Didn't charge anything. So that was, we had 3 swimming pools.
Well, you had what the Clampets might have called a swimming hole.
It was a hole, but it was a swimming pool to us. So we've always had a swimming pool in Titusville until they put the pool on at Memorial Park. In addition to that, we had no lights at Memorial Park. Again, they brought some used lights for another park. Put them at Memorial Park. We had a baseball diamond with lights on it.
Some people don't realize the significance of Memorial Park.
Mm-hmm.
How special it is that Titusville that seemed to have everything, but didn't have that recreation center, that field, such as that. And ultimately, it seems like Memorial Park was the cherry on top.
It was the first one we got. And after a long period of time, and it's still, it still can be improved on, but the land is not there now. On the other side, when I lived out, we had white houses all across the street that were other houses in a triangular on 6th Avenue. They've been torn down now. But expansion for Memorial Park right now, other than what's there now, and they are using, they got a provision there, activities, got trees, for a little shade, and the provision they got there. And it's being well used now. And then on the other side of the Memorial Park, you had the city jail, and we had a dog pound. A couple of days ago, a couple in Town City, they were walking in the park, and 2 dogs attacked those walkers in the park and severely injured them. But back in my day, we had a dog pound. They had dog catchers. They would go through the streets, clean the streets of dogs, wherever they were. Then you had the jail, which is still there. Now, let me go back before we end this. The school situations in Titusville. We had, first of all, it was a kindergarten on First Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. It was a home kindergarten. The lady, if I remember her name, Mariette Kindergarten, was the best kindergartens in the city. She had graduation, I believe, at Green Liberty Baptist Church for her students once a year. And everybody used her services for kindergarten. So with daycare, that was it. And then we had Washington School on 4th Avenue. Beautiful building. Now, it was built with the with the looks of one of the matches, and it was on the street, not over behind a railroad track somewhere, like some of the schools were built back in that time. Mr. Brown was the principal of that school when I was there. He lived next to the Golden Dawn on 6th Avenue. Then I think Dr. Matheson came there and Mr. McGee, and as principal, but Washington School was there. Then we had Center Street to be built when I lived in Titusville. That was a problem with Center Street School when it was first built. They didn't want it to make it look like a school. They used cinder blocks and they painted it white with the blocks. And right next to the homes that were being Honeysuckle Hill, the community objected to that. They came out and they bricked Center Street School up to this day with bricks, made it look like a school, and the playground area. So that was a good thing for the neighborhood itself. It matched the homes that were being sold on Honeysuckle Hill at that time. And then another thing, when Auburn was a 2-year school, or 2-grade school, 9th and 10th, they didn't have the 11th and 12th grade. You had to go to Parker High School. When enrollment got, everybody during my time had to go to Parker. If you lived in Woodlawn, you lived in Sipco, you lived in Northside, West End, Hensley, you had to go to Parker High School. Big enrollment. Mr. R.C. Johnson was the principal there. And by the way, he was my principal at Lincoln School and at Parker School. So I had him as my high school principal and my elementary school principal. When Auburn School was considering adding 2 more grades to it, 10th and 11th, it was a big discussion. They wanted to build that school at the end of Goldwise Street, across the railroad tracks in the woods. So there was a lot of objections to that. In getting to that, you got to go across the train track because they didn't have green spray, all those roads back in my time to get there. They had a on top of that mountain, there was a shooting range up there. They had a shooting range.
I'm not sure I'm quite envisioning where you're speaking. Are we talking about in what is now Woodland Park? Are we still in?
No, beyond Wood. When you get to Goldwise Street and Green Springs Avenue, going south, it dead ends. Across, you got railroad tracks. You got the railroad track. Across the track, at that time, you had a lot of wooded area over there. And that's where I'm speaking of, where they want to locate that school. Mm-hmm. Auburn High School, make it a 4-grade school.
Now, so Auburn High School would have been near where West Center Street.
Beyond, south,
just
over the tracks.
Just over the track, yeah, we're talking about the same area. I will divulge something and I use my granddad voice. Back in my day, I'm through now.
Yeah.
I've got 2 grandchildren, but I've got a license. There were groups of us, and this was not a scouting, we were in scouts, but this was not a scouting deal. Mm-hmm. But some of us, particularly some who were a little older than me, actually decided to build a cabin on the other side of the tracks from West Center Street, and it was neat. It was really impressive how that was done. Now, ultimately, it went away in favor of other
apartments and everything.
Apartments and such, yes.
And by the way, when I was in ISA on Saturdays, I had a friend of mine. His name was Boys and More. We used to go in the woods back over there on Saturday. And by the way, we had 22s. My daddy, we didn't go to kill anybody. We just went to the woods to do some shooting, but our 22 rifles. During that time, they were shooting on the mountain up there because they had a shooting range up there where you disc, you'd go up there and they would come up there and shoot disc on top of the mountain. It's long gone. But we used to go up there and shoot targets in the woods, keep them bullet going stray somewhere. On Saturdays, winter and some summers, we went up there.
Considering that a number of people consider shooting as in, and I'm forgetting the term for, you say pull in the
disc.
disc goes up there. There's another term for it. I'm not going to remember it until I get in my vehicle. But suffice to say, some will consider that a rather high-end pastime.
It is, and it still is. You know, the fee for it, and I don't know what it is. It was expensive then. Only thing you're doing, you're just pulling a disc and shooting it with your shotgun and spinning it in the air. That's cost. Mm-hmm. And you got to get the right kind of over and under shotgun, which they use, not double, to do that kind of shooting. So it was a hobby for a lot of those people who were able to afford that kind of hobby. So back to my point for Elyton High School. There was so much confusion going on, so the Board of Education just dropped the ball, and they say, leave it alone. So we had to end up going back to Parker. They didn't build that school over there. Parker became, and then with the enrollment increasing, it's still the same. And they are assigned from our area, Titusville, to go to Parker now.
Ultimately, going fast forwarding to my day of high school, and my grade school experience was 1st through 8th grade at West Center Street, what I affectionately refer to as the unknown matchbox. Small school about which few people outside of Titusville knew. People would ask, where do you go to school? I said, I go to West Center Street. They would substitute, oh, you go to Center Street? I said, no. I go to, I attend West Center Street. They said, well, where is that?
Yeah.
And I would say, smart aleck that I am, west of Center Street.
Right, but it was not. It was west of the railroad. It was north of the railroad, so on a hill about it. But anyway, and you know, Bessie Estelle was there as principal. I think Cephas was there at one time. And my memory's going back. But anyway, I want to share that with you.
So my point was that as one who was in education, I want you to talk about this a little bit. And you went there a few minutes ago as you gave your own history. How the Birmingham school system was this overrun with, I won't say duality, but a proliferation of schools because of segregation. As in, okay, we can't put blacks and whites together. We'll put a black school here and put a white school here, more like the white school here and the black school down there.
Well, back in that time, you see, that's why, and again, I served as, let me go back again. I was a principal too. I didn't call my name down because I wanted to highlight others. I was a teacher at Hill School for 10 years, and then I went to Patterson Elementary School in Woodlawn as the principal out there at Patterson. Stayed there 3 years. I was moved to Shield School as principal. Stayed there 2.5 years. Then I was made director of schools at the Board of Education. Then I was made assistant superintendent of personnel. Then I was made interim superintendent 3 times. I was in the position for 18 months as superintendent. So during that period of time, the enrollment, at one time, it was around 75,000 students. And that's where we had segregation. We had schools, black and white schools. Then we had to fight, whites enrollment. I mean, they left the city. So that made the enrollment in the schools go down. So we had to close a lot of schools. And the white ones became black in some of the neighborhoods. For example, out on the east side, Huffman High School used to be all white. Malagasy, Arthur, all those, they were in the white community, all white. But what are they now?
They're not white.
They're not white. And so that's why we got total black student enrollment now. And it's now, student enrollment now is down to about, I guess, 23,000, something like, from that 75,000 when I first started working the system. So we had some buildings we had to get rid of because we didn't have any need for them. When we desegregated, we mixed the races and boom, boom, boom.
Well, you set things in place to mix the races.
But it didn't work.
But if the quote majority race decided that they did not want to be with the quote minority race,
Yes,
then
they fled.
yeah, they fled. I'll tell you again my story, and I know this is not about me, but when the day before my sister, 2 years my senior, was going to enroll at West End High School, my parents drove us down to the school. We parked out in front in that circle there in front of the school, and we just looked at the school. And I remember thinking to myself, what's the big deal? She was at West Center Street School for first through eighth grades. Now she's going to another West. This one is West End High School. I did not realize that she was one of the first classes of blacks to actually go there, where whites didn't want them or didn't want us.
Yeah. He was absolutely right. When I went to Patterson School, that was during the turmoil of desegregation. During the time Woodlawn High School, they were jumping out the windows according to the news and the papers and pictures that I saw. And I was principal of, Mr. Morey was the principal of that school at that time. I remember him because we had to have some communication because of our locations. My school and his school and Kennedy's school across there on First Avenue. So, in fact, Patterson School, I was there when we had to integrate Patterson School. I had the whites to come up. In fact, my first PTA president was a white person out there during that period of time. They lived on 55th Street and back in there. They attended there for a while, but and I left before all of that ended. But you don't have any white. Well, the school is now closed now. It's a daycare for the neighborhood now. But I was there during the period of time we integrated.
I remember in my days at West End that for the most part it seemed like utopia. Yes, there were individuals who had fled for Central Park Christian or wherever else whites went.
Yes.
But for the most part, it, to the eye of this very naive student, this was wonderful. You had blacks and whites who were working together. The success of the football program helped, certainly.
Right.
But
sports.
There was, and also it helped that the basketball team had had success behind T.R. Dunn and the like.
Yeah.
And I think that helped whites to get along with the notion of blacks having roles, in prominent roles in the school experience. But what I saw as utopia didn't last.
Didn't last. And it's the same today. It's not, I don't know, I mean, that's going to be, it's a problem. And who has a solution for it? It's just still a problem. And you mentioned T.R. Dunn. When I was at Patterson, his parents lived right behind Patterson School, T.R. Dunn. That was a long time ago I'm speaking of. But I've had some good things in my life. My wife, and she was a psychometrist in the system, and when we married in 1957, and she was an organist. She worked at Center Street School and with Mr. Sheehy, and she was over auditorium and music. And by the way, I keep moving about in my conversation with you, but when she was at Center Street, she did some things in that auditorium. She had programs on top of programs, and the parents, students came from Longman Village at that time too, And they were just like kids who lived on the south side of Titusville. The parents were good parents, the students were good students. And she used to have operettas, and they would buy, the parents from Lawman Village, they would take them, they had to have costume on in the spring. And I did Freddie Shepard, who is now deceased. He worked at Center Street. I made props for all of her programs in my garage, out of cardboard. But they looked like professional stuff on the audience because, pumpkins, they had costumes to match the title of the program. And exposing those kids to that in an elementary school, which an operetta, it takes practice, it takes hard work, it takes a little money from the parents to buy the costumes because they were ordered in their size, and everybody at Lawman Village paid for the costume. They came in the auditorium packed to see the program. But anyway, things like that, going the extra mile to make things better, need more people like that.
In the Birmingham system, you have, and not to be mean, well, I will tell you, I am being mean.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the Birmingham system, and largely I see a desert with a number of oases in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
You have, in no particular order, you have an Epic, you have the W.J. Christian, you have a Wilkinson Middle, you have Sun Valley, you have definitely on the high school level Ramsey,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the flavor of the millennium, which is Phillips Academy.
Mm-hmm.
The better the school is, the more parental participation
You're gonna get.
have.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, every parent in the Birmingham system who has a child in grades K through 8 wants their child at Phillips Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the teachers on that level want to be there. And it winds up being this wonderful marriage where success is almost assured because everybody is involved, everyone is pulling in the same direction. And I'll make a similar point. When Epic began, it was intended to be this crucible where some number of educational theories would be tried. And then once they found out what worked, it would be disseminated through the system. But that didn't work because the other schools didn't have what Epic had. I'm not talking about structure, I'm just talking about that parental involvement that was going to be there that was not elsewhere.
The other schools could be the same. If we had parental support, that's what you need. I mean, you got the parents going to those schools from the same communities where they live. At another school, why have the parents, I mean, it takes a little effort on the principal. See, when I was principal, I was out there on weekends at Patterson and Shield School. I went to some houses out there and introduced myself. They say, that man, he's interested in our kids. They would come to PTA meetings. And when they didn't come and I had their names, I would, I'll shoot them a telephone call. But you get that parental support. And you got a lot of young kids out there. They bring them and drop them off at the school, and that school is suffering because they're not backing. They want you, and you got to back the school by making visits there and supporting the program. I mean, the curriculum should be the same, for all schools. But if you don't have that parental support, it's missing. And that's I'm not going. I've been out of it now. I've been retired 22 years, so I can't tell you what's going on in the system right now. I can only go from the past when I was there.
But in the 22 years that you've been out of it, surely you sat back and you have figured it all out, and you know how to do it now.
Not really, but it would be a different day because, see, I was a strict disciplinarian. My principalships and my teaching classes, you came to school and you're going to behave in my environment. And they knew that. My students knew that everywhere I was a principal. Because I had the parents backing. And when I was made principal, I met with my student body in the auditorium without any teaching pay. When I went to Patterson, I told them, y'all teach, go back to classroom. You can't do that now because you're going to have some going to cut up. But when that happened, when I had my student meeting with my students, a group over there, I told them, I said, hey, stand up a minute. You go to the office. I'll be up there when I get through this meeting. Quiet it down. I singled them out. They wanted attention. I gave them attention. I said, hey, I want to talk to y'all. So I said, when I had that problem, I said, just go and tell Miss Thomas I sent you up there, and you just wait till I come up there.
Loveman Village.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about it. I presume it was as it was up until its transition of late, a public housing community, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, as you said, parents there did for their kids.
Back in my day,
Mm-hmm.
my wife worked with them. I worked with them because at that time I was a principal, but I still had that flavor of parent participation. And I can't call their names on it, but they would talk with me, and I would, talk with them. It's a relationship you build in communication, I'm saying, with your parents. And if you lose that, you've lost that kid almost.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Well, I understand.
Okay.
I'm going to throw out a few names, and you touched on a couple of them earlier. And I'll call the name or the institution, and you tell me what crossed your mind, what you think of this. Freedom Riders.
Back in the day when they were free to ride, I only listened to it on the TV. And I can't give you any comment about it because not having the background about the motivation, I knew the motivation, but the outcome of what was being being sought at that time. So I don't want to answer that question.
That's fine. The murder of Emmett Till.
Well, that was something happened in Mississippi, and when I looked at the news, and his remains was terrible. It was something that is in the minds of a lot of people right to this day, and that's about the only thing I want to comment. But it was a terrible thing by him whistling at another person.
Well, let's be clear, not just another person, a white woman.
Thank you.
As that took place in Mississippi, let's bring it closer to home. George Wallace.
Well, he stood in the door down at Alabama, and I went to Alabama after he stood at the door. It was open for me, made room for me to go to Alabama. I went and got my degree from Alabama and part of my doctorate.
Closer to home.
Yeah.
In fact, your Avondale home, Bull Connor.
He was a terrible man, in my opinion. What he did, some of the things he did to us, being chief of police at that time. And I mentioned him where he lived, and he's gone now. But anyway, he was following orders and doing what the community wanted him to do at that time, I imagine.
It's not fair to ask, so I shouldn't ask, but I am. Do you think he was simply, he did it with such zeal. Do you think he was simply following orders, or was there not a desire?
For his activity, it had to be implanted in him. I don't think he could, implanted and the orders, so that made him the man he was.
We'll go to the other side of that, on the other side of that battle line. Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth.
I didn't know him personally, but I only, during our civil rights struggles, he and my pastor, they worked together, and his brother, Reverend A.D. King, they were working together with the movement. And he did some good things, very good things. And that's about as much as I can say for him. But he stood the ground for us to this day, where we are now, enjoying some of the fruits of their labors.
Reverend James Bevel?
I don't know him that much.
That makes two of us. I don't know.
I know him from the movement, but I don't know anything that I can talk about. And that's I have to leave it there.
What, if any, and I imagine there is, recollection that you have of the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy?
The caliber of that man was, with the movement that he had doing with the country at that time, was amazing. And things just stood still for a while because of that assassination in Texas. So he was on the road to do a lot of good things for all people. So I'll leave it there.
I'll go to another assassination, the death of Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh my goodness. In Tennessee on that balcony, man, that was a real blow to the black people everywhere. I mean, it stopped some of the movement. Pause, let me put it that way. Pause some of the movement. The movement is still going on and going to go on forever because there are a lot of changes that needs to be made. But that was a blow to the black folk when he was killed. And see, my pastor worked with him in Montgomery, Porter. They were very close. And I'll leave it there.
Does the name Bill Terry Jr. mean anything to you?
Yes, it does. He was my neighbor. He lived a block from me. He was responsible for you being in Ellenwood right now. And I knew the parents. Miss Bill, they lived next door to the store where I worked, Lucky 7. That was a butcher there. He lived right next door. And he's the reason we can use Ellenwood Cemetery to this day.
I did a story last year, and I was blessed that I did it last year and didn't wait until this year.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was able to include his sister in the story. She passed away earlier this year. He thought enough to ask to be buried at Elmwood. Mm-hmm. Even when he was in Vietnam, wrote letters, mm-hmm. a letter back to his family saying the same. Mm-hmm. As we look back on that, was that even fathomable at that point? As you think back to being a black person in Birmingham.
Well, it was just another piece of the pie that was put together to desegregate a lot of things. And that was something that once they went to the service and you served your country and you fought and you saw your buddies being killed and all and that. And when you get back home, you're gonna be mistreated that way, even in death. In fact, it's been a benefit. My parents are out there. I have a lot of my relatives are buried in Ellenwood right now. I got graves. I bought graves out there, boats and everything else. I'm gonna be put out there one day whenever I leave it. My wife's out there right now, and. You look at the being open, it has some advantages. You look at some of our cemeteries, they're not well kept. You look at Shadow Lawn right now. I got some friends out there. You can't get in the door. You can't get in the driveway. We're taller than I am. I mean, I'm 6'7", 6'3". And you got to have that endowment like Elwood to keep things like they are. And I think somebody out of town bought Ellenwood Cemetery for my memory. I hope I'm not too far from that. But to keep it going like it's been going that way ever since it's been there. And that's a big cemetery.
Huge.
Huge. Okay. So, and who wouldn't want their remains to be, you know, I mean, you can go in at every now and then go out to the grave and think about and have memories of the person who's in the ground without using the lawnmower to get there.
And yet, the reality for us, prior to that declaration made by Bill Terry, was you can help dig the grave, you can cut the grass, you ain't gonna be buried here.
Yeah, that's right. But he stopped that.
How liberating is it that he did that? I mean, we talk about King and Shuttlesworth and we shall overcome, but that was a circumstance, as you kind of said a moment ago, you can overcome over here, but you're not going to overcome over here, over there.
But that was to be, you know, it was, you know, it was time for that, you know. I'm not kicking out cemeteries, but that was something that happened right now, and we're benefiting from it. You know, when that, and he had the court, he had the backing of the courts in that decision. You know, that was the, it didn't happen. He had to still force them to do it. They didn't volunteer.
No.
Everything, all of our actions are coming through the courts, right? I mean, well, I ain't gonna say nothing about them. We'll make up of it. But anyway, we got some other things we got to deal with.
We talked about the Mecca that was Titusville as you were growing up. Talk to me about where Titusville is and where Titusville is going.
I have no idea where it's going, but it's going to take some minds, just labor on how you want the community to look like, to perform like, to be like. Because right now we're running out, well, space is no longer there. I'll tell you what, when we moved the 6th Avenue Baptist Church from the south side over here at the old church, see, UAB is gobbling up every piece of land it can going west, and if they had to go south, they would do, but the expansion is moving this way westward. Across there, once they get across that railroad track, the jail is there, Memorial Park, and that, but it's going to be a hop, you're going to skip over that one time. And there's been this discussion of expanding that far, and that's going to wipe out some of that Titusville area, if that ever happens. But the future of Titusville is bright. We still have people in there who are concerned about the neighborhood. They're trying to keep it clean. They're trying to keep it from crime, dope, and all that. But it's going to take the whole community to do that, and the city to do that, and the city department, police department, if it gets to that point. Well, see, another thing right now is going back. He asked me about home ownership. You got Loveman's Village there. I think the guy who is Roger White used to be over it, but now you got Ron Sees, his last name. He's a developer for housing in the Titusville and bringing new homes. What's his last name?
I don't recall.
Byers.
Yeah,
Bills. Ronald Bills. That's his name. He replaced, Roger passed away, so he replaced Roger White, who was in that position. And he's doing a good job of trying to, like the new Loveman's Village area there, purchase, Bob rental, and some other houses that they are renovating in the area there. So the life of it's going to be there forever. And I think Sterling,
Marion Sterling?
from the funeral home, Davenport Harris, I think his emphasis is on trying to do something with the area of Titusville, because he grew up, his mom and dad were school teachers. I know she was at Center Street. She worked with my wife there, Sterling. And I think his idea is, because part of that funeral home now, he's trying to make a museum or something right there, I understand, on the side of that. Am I wrong on that?
I don't know if this is a museum. They've obviously created the crematorium there.
Mm-hmm.
They've taken the space that was, I think, the monument company, and
Yeah.
they've restored the lion's share of that building
Mhm.
to where, as part of their business, if someone wanted to have a repast, they could
Yeah,
have it
right
in
there,
that
in that
space.
old building on the south side of his funeral.
But if someone wanted to have some other
Yeah.
type event,
Mhm.
that's possible
Yeah.
there as well. So yeah, I think that much like anything,
Yeah.
it takes a vision.
It takes a vision. And so I think that it's bright for the area there. And I know 6th Avenue renovating, it's, the property there, and New Pilgrim. And by the way, all three of those churches that I mentioned, I'm going to mention New Pilgrim, South Side, 6th Avenue. They came from off of the South Side. And the Catholic Church, it was over on South Side, but it is up there, Presbyterian Church up there on Green Spring. When NH was on the South Side, when he first came here, and he had a straight bungalow, white building out in the field over there. Then he built the other New Pilgrim Church, and then eventually he bought property like 6th Avenue. And by the way, where we are located, 6th Avenue Baptist Church, that once was a home for white girls who were pregnant. Mm-hmm. He had a big 2-story building right there on that property. Yes, it was a home for unmarried white girls.
To what degree is 6th Avenue Baptist Church, what legacy is it leaving?
Well, it has a long running good game. It's steady. That legacy will live forever. And by the way, this month, 6th Avenue will be 132 years old. On the 18th of this month, 132 years in existence from the time that it was on the South Side to the present time.
Not many churches older.
No, 132 years old.
Our church is 144, I think it is. Right?
Wow, Broad
Street.
Broad
yes.
Street.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Of course, it's not in Titusville. It's just
Yeah, I didn't.
across the way.
But I knew your dad well, and he and Dr. Porter, they blended well.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Absolutely no doubt. Is there anything that through my own ignorance or sheer stupidity that I have failed to address?
Well, let me see. I want to mention another thing. I think I was trying to get some little notes and little sentences that I could talk with you today. Back in my day in Titusville, we had a trucking company. It was the owner was Ollie Hall. He had eyesight to have 3 trailer trucks. He used to make trips to Florida to haul on the back of his trailer fruits and vegetables and watermelons. And his office was up there on 1st Street and 6th Avenue. His wife was his dispatcher. He was a rival thing in the community, Ollie Hall. I didn't mention Willie Brown. Willie Brown was he sold coal, he had 3 vegetable trucks. In the afternoon, late in the summer evenings, when people sitting on their porches, which they don't do hardly anymore, he would come through the neighborhood and people would buy watermelons, cantaloupe, tomatoes, beans off of his vegetable truck in the afternoon. He had 3 trucks. He would run through Titusville and the South Side. Back during his time, Dr. Willie Brown and Dr. Stewart, it was a tragedy during my period of time in Titusville. The houses caught fire and they lost their sons, and Willie Brown and Dr. Stewart, and that was devastating to me because I was young, and somebody to be burned up in a house was, it was kind of a bad thing for me to realize. But I wanted to mention them because he lived on 4th Avenue behind where I lived. Dr. Stewart at that time, Willie Brown lived on 5th Avenue and Center Street, and he was a real nice man. He didn't use scales. He just grabbed a bunch of peas and put it in a bag. and he had 3 vegetable shops. I want to mention that to you too. Most people have forgotten about him, but I remember him because I used to take the bags from his truck to the people who bought his goods. And on top of that, next to my wife's house, there was an automobile mechanic named Mr. Mixon. He repaired the cars of people, not only in Titusville, other places, but he had an automobile. He was in business to repair cars. He was used well in Titusville. Mr. Mixon on 1st Avenue. And then we had some barber shops there. Kurt Gillum, that was a gathering place for the brothers back in my day, all ages. And his barber shop was right behind Elyton Church there, South Elyton Church. And around the corner we had Jack Frost cleaning, did a little tailoring, and it was in the alley back there behind the house like my mother's shop was. He was a businessman, that was Jack Frost Cleaners.
Is my memory failing me, or were there not 2 bowling alleys in Titusville?
Yes, that was on my list. We had one where on Theater Avenue, where Sears Roebuck warehouse used to be, on I think that's Delta Street, Homemaker. But we had 2 bowling alleys. When the first one was built up there by Golden Flakes, it was top notch. They put a lot of money in that place, and we used it well because I stayed up there sometime 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning throwing my big heavy ball down that way, trying to get us 3 under score. Then they had one on Goldwire and 6th Avenue, back behind that top place now. Just a building back, the building's still there. And I bowled there a lot of time. We had 2 bowling alleys in Titusville.
Titusville had
everything you wanted, even grocery stores. But we didn't have the big stores like Foodwood at that time until the Palisades was, it opened up there, but it eventually closed.
But you had A&P.
Yeah. But it was on 12th Street.
Wait, okay, I'm remembering.
We didn't have an A&P out there. We had Heels. We didn't have a Heels out.
Well, okay, but hold it. But A&P, was that not A&P that was on 6th Avenue, right at Goldwire?
No.
No?
Not an A&P. It was it's still a grocery store. In a new little shopping center there.
Mm-hmm.
No, that wasn't an A&P. It was I don't know what brand because we didn't shop in there too much. A Cleaners was right there, and a drugstore, too, and an automobile. They made the automobile back on the back, but another meat store there now.
Was the drugstore like Holloway or something?
I don't remember the name of it. It was on the corner. Then they had the barber shops, but I don't remember the name of that store. But there was a grocery store there, but it wasn't. I don't think it was a A&P. On the A&P that I remember, it was being on 12th Street up there. They made a condominium out of it now. Then they had a big one downtown on 5th Avenue and 18th Street. You park under the bottom of that one. I think it may have been a Heels on A&P. It may have been an A&P store. Okay. Atlantic Pacific.
I think that's got what I need.
I hope I have been helpful.
You have been helpful. You have been entertaining. You have been informative. Mm. All that and then some. Thank you very much, sir.
You're quite welcome. And we'll see where we go from here.